Okay, we're ready to go?
Good morning, yes.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and all the offices. First thing I'll do is I'll read this little thing to make sure everybody kind of knows what's going on before we start the meeting. All of you would please make sure to silence all your electronic devices that you have so that it does not interfere with any of the people doing presentations. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting through all the types of things that could happen. And before we begin, here are some important guidelines. Please silence again your phones. During the public participation, you will be placed on mute. And when you're ready for your part as the public to discuss items or to come under the public comment, you will be unmuted and allowed to speak. After each agenda item, I will read the agenda item that is done and go to the next item. And at the same time, then when the board is done discussing, then they'll open to the public in all three areas, including Zoom or by voice, by Comcast. Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll have roll, please.
Good morning. Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Ms. Brown? Mr. Horal? Ms. Lopes? Mr. Hofstall? Mr. Savage? Mr. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Ms. Deming?
Here.
Ms. Dyer? Ms. Connell? Mr. Liba?
I am here.
Thank you. Ms. Agers?
Here.
Ms. Fast? Mr. Robertson? Mr. Cryer?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews?
Here.
Mr. Ward? Mr. Delgadillo? Mr. Cantu? Ms. Nguyen? Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Medeiros?
Here.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Chris, excuse me.
Chris
to the chair, this
Savage.
is Chris Savage. I've joined.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Let's go on to approval of the March 7th minutes. At this time, I will entertain any changes or addendums, or if it's fine, in all three areas. The North, is there any changes to the March 7th minutes? Okay, hearing none from the board, go to the South. Any changes or comments on the minutes? Okay, let's bring it back here to the Central. Any board members' comments on the minutes of March 7th? All right, let's open to the public in the North. Any comments by Zoom or by phone or whatever technology?
There are no public members in the North.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to the South.
No public comment in the South?
Great, thank you. Let's bring it back here to the Central. Any public comment? Let's see.
There's
Okay.
no public comment in Fresno and no indication of any comments online.
Okay, great, thank you. Then we'll take it at this time. We'll take the minutes on March 7 and approve as been submitted. Let's go to item number 4. At this time is the public, and the public will be able to comment on items that are not on the agenda, at that time. And you will have a 3-minute timeline, and we'll go to the North first.
There are no comments here in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south.
No public comment in the south?
Great, let's bring it back here to the central. Any public comment here or online?
No indication of public comment in our office or online.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let's go to item number 5. And on item number 5, we'll have some time at the end. I would like to hear from some of the CAC members on the conditions of the flooding and the water type situations that are going on, especially even in the south. So we'll do that. We'll do that at the end, and so I don't forget. So somebody remind me, make sure that during your comments we can hear some information of what's going on, and if there's anything that maybe the district can do or whatever to help those areas, that would be great. All right, let's go to item number 6, the executive APCO. Samir, good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, CAC members. I'll try to keep it short. I know there's quite a bit of discussion on the agenda, so I'll keep mine brief. Well, first, I just wanted to thank the CAC for the action at the last meeting on the advocacy around the farmer funding and working with the legislature and the governor's office to hopefully restore farmer funding in the state budget. We were able to get that letter out, and there is quite a bit of other legislative work that's going on as well. A number of bills that have impacts to the Air District. I'm thinking at our next CAC meeting might be time to have a fuller update on where those efforts are. Just want to acknowledge the CAC and appreciate the quick work on that. Also wanted to mention a couple of items that I think are of interest to the CAC at the upcoming April board meeting. We're looking to have an item on the agenda to approve a value-wide residential air purifier program. Is something that you've heard quite a bit about in the past and have supported efforts to help residents deal with wildfire impacts by helping them have access to these indoor air purifiers. We've been able to cobble together some funding and are hoping to have our board approve the launch of another value-wide program on that effort. There's a couple of programs that we're working on right now in our 617 communities. This would be a value-wide version of that program that builds on the pilot that we ran last year successfully. And then lastly, just wanted to mention that we're going to be reporting to the board, and we'll bring a report to the CAC as well on the winter season. We have a major effort during the winter season to encourage residents to reduce residential wood burning. There's a grant component, there's a regulatory component, there's an outreach and education component to that. Every year we do a look back on how the season went. It was definitely a productive year in terms of seeing reductions in residential wood burning across all of those different facets, and just want to highlight that at a very high level here, and just look forward to providing that report at the next CAC meeting so that we can share that information with you. It's going to be on our board agenda as well in a couple of weeks. And with that, Mr. Chair and CAC members, happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. This time I'll open it up to the north. CAC members, any questions of Samir on his report or items? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the south, the CAC board members. Anything of Samir has brought up in regards to the reports? Okay, hearing none, bring it back here to the central. Any CAC members?
Just a quick question.
Yes, please.
I can remember the days when shake roofs were eliminated and everybody was in an uproar, but eventually it just ran its course. I view that somewhat similar to fireplaces. We're having to eliminate, well, we have to make that move to electric vehicles for trucks, and all these changes that people are looking as in the farming community as very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very tough to deal with. When will the day come where we just eliminate fireplaces? I mean, you can't build one in a new home. What if you could respond to that?
That's a great question. So and you'll hear more about this, I think, at the next meeting when we provide a fuller report on this. But there has been a major transition in the valley from, an abundance of fireplaces and wood stoves, abundance of wood, cheap access to wood, where a lot more frequent occurrences and more of a practice of burning. Over the years, for a variety of reasons, we've seen reductions in that, everything from our rules and, like you're saying, new development, there's requirements around this. Behaviors have changed, so every several years, we conduct a public opinion survey as well to really try to understand. We obviously don't have we don't know exactly what everybody does in their home, but we try to get a sense of how those behaviors change over the years. And you do see that consistent decrease over time of residents that want to burn. The remaining burning, much of it is ambiance burning. It's not for heat. Although in rural communities, I think there's still challenges there where with propane maybe being another potential source, but also with leaky homes, needing a lot of weatherization and all that, there's still some remaining kind of heat-driven, burning that or if you're up in the foothill communities, for example, a lot of that goes on. But generally on the valley floor, over time, you've seen less desire to burn. You've seen regulations sort of backstop that, with no burn days. In big parts of the valley, in Fresno, Kern, other counties, the majority of days during the wintertime are no burn days because our thresholds are so low under our current rule. And we're actually continuing to ratchet that down potentially in the next, actually throughout this year. You'll be hearing from us on contingency measures and our new PM plan that we're drafting, and there's continued efforts, even with as low as the levels are. We actually have the strictest rule anywhere in the country on no burn days for residential wood burning. So the behaviors have definitely changed for a variety of reasons. And and as a result, the percentage of our wintertime emissions problem that's attributable to residential wood burning also has continued to decrease significantly from where it used to be to where it is now. So that's where it's heading. I can't tell you exactly when it's a full on if that's something that will ever be done. But my hope would be it is one of the cheapest ways that you can reduce wintertime PM 2.5 emissions, which has been why our measures have generally been strongly supported, although there are definitely elements of the population that take issue with being told whether or not they have the ability to burn. But over time, most of our comments are, hey, good job, keep going, and we're getting lesser and lesser of the it's not appropriate for you to tell us when we can and can't burn. I think that shift has been happening over a multi-year period, and it's become a lesser and lesser of an issue. But it's still there. It's still it just takes one or two homes in a neighborhood to fumigate that neighborhood with smoke. And so we still get complaints, and there's a lot of enforcement that goes on every year through our no burn days. Believe it or not, we still issue hundreds of tickets every year to residents who, many of them are first time. So we work with them. We have ways to work through public education on that. But we have multi time violators as well, and so there's still a percentage of the population who really believes that it's just their right to burn, no matter whether we have a no burn day or not. So. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's been the general trend, and we're going to be providing quite a bit of information about this at the upcoming report.
Any other members? Samir, I think from the standpoint of your discussion about the farmer funding and the appropriation, the money and all that, I do know that everybody's got a copy of the letter that went out by all the groups, and that letter has been very effective. I've been hearing all sorts of different discussions and calls from various legislators, and appreciate the staff and you guys going to Sacramento and working the halls. And I think that it's been really been proven to be a good thing. And I think the letter was pretty complete. And I think the part that I was told last Thursday was by one legislator that all the groups were part of it. And I think that's what kind of like saying, hey, they're all together. So what do we do to make this happen? And so I think that was a good thing. And I do want to acknowledge Kelly. She took a lot of time to come up. She had other things going on, Luckily, she didn't need a boat quite yet, but came up here to get the letter signed so it would be completed by all. And that was a good thing. And Kelly, thank you for doing that and appreciate it. Do you feel that the other air districts from CAPCO and others are in the same type of a little bit of a situation for what amount they got? Are they seeing some saying, hey, we got to make sure because we do need this 3 or 4 million or whatever?
Yeah, no, there's definitely support from other parts of the state in trying to restore that farmer funding. In fact, the Association of Air Districts, CAPCOA, the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, have taken a position requesting that funding to be restored, and there are individual efforts by different districts. So I do think there's quite a bit of and strong advocacy going on around restoring that funding. Now, it's a tough budget year, so ultimately what it's going to come down to is there's some really key questions around some of the revenues that are still, trickling in. There's actually, because of the way some of the tax revenues have been changed recently, some of those revenues actually aren't even going to be known until later on in the budget process. So there's a few uncertainties that make it kind of hard to know exactly where the budget's going to land on this issue. But I think the advocacy has been strong, and it's actually still growing over time as the budget works its way through the process. So, but it's something that I've definitely been advocating heavily with my colleagues across the state to make sure that they're doing what they need to do as well because this program is statewide and it benefits agriculture, and actually forestry is part of the list of eligible project types as well. So the northern parts of the state in particular are very, very eager to see this restored. So a lot of support from them at this point as well.
One last little question on the budget. Being that we worked diligently hard on the agricultural burn program removal to stop burning, we've had a smoke management for years. And then the legislature and the ARB drove its position. Do you see, being it is a tough budget year, do you see any type of funds coming from the state to help on the ag burn at all, or we're going to be very fortunate to get what we get out of farmer?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mr. Chair. I haven't seen any evidence yet of a specific Valley allocation the way that we were successfully able to include in the budget 2 years ago when we got the $180 million directed to the Valley to support the transition that you're talking about. So I haven't seen yet much desire to include a line item level in that same way. There have been pots of funding that are a little bit higher level related to sustainable agriculture that aren't fully defined. I wonder as this works its way through the process whether we're actually able to work with CDFA and others that may be the lead agencies on some of these ag-related funds to see if there's a carve-out or eligibility or something that we can do to try to expand that level of funding. And then you cobble that together with hopefully, and I know there's a lot of work going on the federal side with Farm Bill reauthorization, but also other funds through the IRA funds, some of the climate smart ag, type of funds. Is there an opportunity within, these billions of dollars that are going to be unfolding over the next couple of years under IRA to put together a valley-wide or even a statewide, proposal, if you will, that, again, that continues to fill that gap as our current funding that's now been in place for a couple of years. There's still some funding left, but over time, it'll definitely run out. Funding runs out at some point. And so we think there's about a year's worth of funding right now in the current pot of funding. So we definitely need to see at the state and federal level, hopefully, and especially on the federal side with the IRA funds, is there some backfilling of those funds or ongoing funding that we could rely on? Still not sure, but it's something that we definitely got our eye on. It's part of our budget request, and I know it's been a priority for the ag sector and others as well. And we'll see. I think we need to keep pushing hard and get a carve out somewhere down the road here if possible.
And then the last question, I promise you all. Due upon the weather conditions, we had Sigma coming at us on the west side of most of the farms, of losing a lot of land, somewhere around 500,000 to 1 million acres. Now with this weather conditions, and as you heard on Monday, but we are going to have even more trees that are going to be damaged, that will have to be pulled out because of what happens to them when they don't have oxygen, and from the standpoint of standing water. Do you think maybe that we can get some assistance maybe from the Federal Department of Interior or somebody to help us deal with maybe that type of a situation versus what we had before? Mother Nature has decided to give us rain. So is there something that maybe we can look at that as an opportunity maybe to help deal with some of this, or?
I think it's a critical issue, Mr. Chair, that you bring up, and I'm really interested to follow up with you and others that are, I know, working very hard right now to understand the impacts of the drought, or the the exact opposite of drought, the water, atmospheric river related, the flooding and the issues that we're seeing there. Right now is the time to really be thinking about the asks related to the disaster, related funds, through whether it's the USDA or other FEMA or other agencies. I'm not sure, exactly where all these funds are going to come from, but this is the time actually to start thinking about how to include that particular issue as an air quality related issue, that if there aren't funds to deal with those orchards, and we therefore get in a situation where there's a lot of burning or something like that being requested in a very short amount of time, we could really miss an opportunity actually for a win-win situation of helping the growers deal with their issue, but having the funds that are there to help them with that situation. So definitely want to follow up with you on that and try to get a better sense of exactly what we're talking about, what's the up to sort of extent of how many acres are we potentially looking at, and how do we put together some sort of an ask essentially with USDA. Obviously a lot of partners there that we can talk to about some of the existing funding streams, and are there new funds that we also have to look for that. So we don't, it's definitely in our mind. That's just one of, I think, many flood related issues that we should be thinking about, even though a lot of people don't immediately think about air side of things when it comes to the flooding. There are issues, like you just mentioned, a number of other issues that we may want to consider. Emerging from the flood, issues related to dust, maybe with all the silt and everything that's been moving around everywhere, and cleaning roadways, how do we make sure that basically coming out of this, that our communities have the support that they need, so that we don't create air impacts, and we also get them the resources that they need. So I'll follow up with you on that, and anybody else who's interested or has ideas on that. It's something we definitely want to be more proactive on if we have some idea of sort of what those issues are.
Okay, great, thank you.
That would be me.
Yes.
Excellent.
Kelly.
Yeah, we'll circle with you, Kelly, as well.
Okay, any other members? Okay.
I have one really dumb question, but I have to ask it anyway. So I don't have like Manny's years of experience in working with the government side of things so much, so maybe he already knows. But my question is, so all these millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that have been allocated for the things that we're doing to the district, where is that money actually held? What banks is that money in? Where is that money? And have we talked about or thought about in planning, what happens if any of those banks shut down? I mean, if SVB could go down and had to be bailed out, Deutsche Bank went down and they're bailing it out, and it's one of the biggest in the world. Second time, right? They had to bail it out last time too. Where's the money, and what happens if it disappears?
Yeah, so it's a good question.
Are there reserves, and where are they?
Doesn't it come from the Department of Treasury?
No, so we
We can't print our own, unfortunately, like we used to in the old days. So
no, we keep it. We've got an arrangement with the Fresno County treasurer as far as the actual cash that we have. Now we do get our funding comes from a mix of local, state, and federal funding sources, and so but as we receive revenues, depending on wherever it's coming from, it's banked basically through Fresno County's system locally here.
So if Fresno County banks went belly up, the money would be gone.
Ours, and I imagine Fresno County's money too.
Yeah. That's not a good thing to think about, and a lot of other things. But I mean, this is real stuff is happening right now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not gonna solve that one. That's very sorry.
Gave you something to go home and think about.
But at this time, any other members? Okay, let's go to the public. Is the public in the north? Any questions of Samir on his presentation?
There are no public comments in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south.
No public comments in the south.
Great, thank you. Bring it back here to the central.
No public commenters in office here in Central or online.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, let's go to item number 7. Emily, on the, well, that definitely, I better look up next time before I say Emily, huh? Okay,
Tricked you.
all right.
Yeah, Emily cannot make it today, and then John is out of town at a conference, so you get me.
And you are?
Patrick Houlihan, supervisor in
Right.
the Plans and Rules Department, so.
Right. And we had definitely a great Green Donuts activity of 2 weeks ago
That's right.
on St. Patrick's Day.
That's
So
right.
it was all worth it, so
Yeah, sure did.
please, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to give the update for the plans and rules. Let's start with our rules. So we do have a workshop planned April 17th to bring what we call our LDAR suite of rules. Those are the leak detection and repair, rules 4401, 4409, 4623, 4624, and last but not least, 4455. And then we'll have those go, like I said, on a April 17th workshop to present those, and then we'll continue working on those rules for going to the governing board later for adoption this year. Keeping along with the oil and gas industry, we're going to also continue to work on our crude oil production sumps rule 4402. That is needed to be addressed through the expedited barked analysis that was required through the AB 16 commitments, AB 617 commitments. And then furthermore, moving down onto some further rules that our Permit Service Department is going to bring before the governing board on April 20th. Rules 1020, which is our definitions rule, 2201, new and modified stationary source rule, and 2301, emission reduction credit banking rules. So that kind of completes the rule updates. We'll move on to the planning portion. We had a workshop on March 23rd for the plan to address the 2012 PM 2.5 NAAQS standards. We'll have another workshop for that. There's some components that are due in June, and then that full plan needs to be addressed by the end of this year. And we're progressing to get those to meet those deadlines. We are working on our maintenance plan, our first maintenance plan for the revoked 1-hour ozone standard, which the district attained in 2016. To get redesignated, you have to come back to EPA with a 10-year plan on how you're going to maintain the standard. And so we have that planned also for a workshop on April 18th to address that 10-year maintenance plan, as it's called. And then lastly, we're working on our SIP contingency revision plan. We did have a workshop 2 weeks ago on March 22nd to address that. And we are tentatively planning to take that package to the governing board this quarter. And with that, that kind of concludes the plans and rules update. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Houlihan. Why don't we go to the north? Any questions of the CAC members?
Just
Go
a
ahead,
quick
please.
question, if you can hear me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just, can you give me an update on the 12 microgram per meter cubed PM 2.5? Do we have to submit a new SIP that looks at a lower limit than that existing 12 micrograms per meter cubed?
No, this one would address that 12.
Okay, and because mostly we satisfy that from what I can see. So certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but the nervousness is that we're going to face a more stringent PM 2.5 rule in the future. Is that right?
That is correct.
But for the end of this year, we're going to have a plan still with the 12 microgram limit. And from
Yes.
the statistics that are published by our beloved pollution control district, it seems like we mostly seem to meet that. So thank you.
Yeah,
Hopefully my understanding is correct.
Yeah, I think it's generally correct, Mr. Lee, but just wanted to add that the ongoing issue that the valley, kind of faces from an attainment perspective is that attainment is defined by every federal site, being able to meet the standards. So yes, most of the valleys made significant progress and are well on its way to meeting the 12 standard, but there are some locations, in Bakersfield and Fresno that have been particularly challenging on the PM 2.5. There's a number of issues involved with that. I know we've talked about that here before, and I'm sure the next few months you'll be hearing even more about this as the next rounds of contingency related to that standard, as well as the plan revision that Patrick was talking about by the end of this year. There'll be more conversation around that, but you brought up a very good point, which is that the majority of the valley, is already meeting many of these different standards, but every location in the valley basically has to meet the standard for the whole valley to be established as meeting the standard.
Ned, are we okay? I guess. Ned, are you okay? All right, great, super. Okay, any other members of the board? Questions? In the north? Seeing none, let's go to the south. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
please, Mr. Clark.
This is Les Clark. Did you say the gentleman that just gave the presentation for the district, did you say April 17th for all LiDAR concerns? Is that what you just told me?
Yes, April 17th
Well-
at 2:00.
Well, when are you gonna send out a notice on that?
That was sent out yesterday.
Well, that's the reason I don't have it then. I'm old, I can do Pony Express, so I guess that's why I missed it. But it was sent out yesterday?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I appreciate it. Because there's a lot of folks that are interested in that. I want to make sure that I have information available. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's going to be in person at the Bakersfield?
Yes, that will be in person in Bakersfield, also on Zoom, and also video teleconference through all 3 regions.
Perfect, great, okay, thank you. Any other members in the south?
Wait a minute, let me ask you something. We're getting all kinds of communication that says that Zoom is not something we do anymore. So I don't know, is the district going against that or what? I mean, we get it from every group that I'm involved with saying, hey, you can't do that anymore. You got to meet in person, because that was done for the COVID deal. So someone needs to explain to me, are we doing it or we're not doing it? Are you illegal or are we legal?
Yes, Mr. Clark, we are legal. And I think what you're referring to might be, as you're seeing here today with all the CAC members that are actually here in person. I think you're referring to, maybe the Brown Act bodies or Bagley-Keene at the state level bodies where there's been transitions, away from the various COVID emergency, kinds of provisions. But when it comes to workshops and meetings, and I'm sure you're still involved to some extent, or maybe not. That'd be great, by the way, if you never have to do another Zoom meeting, Mr. Clark, ever again, because I think everybody got kind of tired of Zoom meetings. But Zoom is still around as an option for their engagement at the different types of meetings. But yeah, yes, you're right though, for Brown Act type meetings, for example, those days now there are provisions that would allow you to do remote participation, but they're very difficult to meet under state law. So generally it's back to in person for official meetings like these.
Well, I guess I misinterpreted what I read, but I'm involved in about 4 or 5 different organizations, and that was of concern. So if you're illegal, you're going to jail, Samir, not me.
Okay, Mr. Clark, excellent. Thank you. All right, let's bring it back here to the central. Any members of the board, questions of Samir? Okay, I mean, of Mr. Houlihan in his presentation. If not, let's go to the public. Public in the north of Mr. O'Houlihan's comments on the rules.
No public comment in the north.
Great, let's go to the south. Any
No public comment in the south.
Okay, bringing it back here to Fresno.
No public comment in Fresno or online.
All right, great. Thank you very much,
All right,
Mr.
thank you.
Houlihan. All right. Let's go to item number 8, a verbal report from the California Air Resources Board, CARB. I think, is that going to be you, Laura, or ARB? Item number 8.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Laura Carr with the California Air Resources Board. I'm an air pollution specialist in our Air Quality Planning and Science Division. And this morning I have the brief update on CARB actions from our March hearing to share. In the interest of time, I'll kind of just go fairly quickly through these items, but first item that I wanted to mention is that the board adopted the California Smog Check Performance Standard Modeling and Program Certification, or the Smog Check certification, specifically for 2 ozone standards, for the 70 parts per billion 8-hour ozone standard and also the 75 parts per billion ozone standard. This Smog Check certification was prepared in order to address Clean Air Act requirements for ozone non-attainment areas within the state. And it demonstrates that California's Smog Check program meets the federally mandated inspection and maintenance program requirements for all of the applicable non-attainment areas, which includes, of course, San Joaquin Valley. So the Smog Check certification, which was adopted, will be sent to US EPA for inclusion in the California SIP. Second item was that the board approved a delegation to our executive officer until the end of the year, until December 31st, 2023. And this is delegation of specific powers to consider any CARB staff proposed new, amended, or revoked emission standards, test procedures, and compliance test procedures for new on-road motor vehicles. And specifically, the board authorized the executive officer to exercise that delegated authority to provide manufacturers with additional compliance flexibility to meet requirements of new regulations to facilitate implementation, while ensuring that that flexibility does not reduce the emission benefits of the existing mobile source regulations. So that delegation of powers, like I mentioned, will terminate at the end of December 2023. The third item was simply that the board reappointed the current 13 members of CARB's Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, or EJAC. This is the committee that was created under Assembly Bill 32, and EJAC advises CARB in developing the scoping plan and other issues related to AB 32. And it's comprised of representatives from California communities that are most heavily impacted by air pollution, including disadvantaged communities that have minority or low income populations. The board also approved the first EJAC charter developed by the committee members and by CARB, and that charter sets goals for CARB and EJAC members. It provides accountability and transparency and outlines the working relationship as it relates to governance for the ongoing Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. And the last item that I wanted to mention here is that the board adopted amendments to the aftermarket parts procedure to clarify the process for electric vehicle conversions to receive an exemption from the California Vehicle Code section on anti-tampering. So the unique nature of an electric vehicle conversion was not specifically addressed by the current procedure, and a new section on the requirements for electric vehicle conversion applications was added. So the proposed amendments will help clarify, simplify, and streamline the application process for a manufacturer of electric vehicle conversions by clearly identifying the requirements for those types of conversions. And those amendments are expected to result in more electric vehicles on the roads in California. So that's all of the update that I had today. Happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me go to the north, CAC members. Any questions of Laura? from ARB on the board items? Hearing none, let's go to the south of CAC members. Questions of
I've got a-
Laura Clark.
Yeah, this is Les Clark. I got a couple of questions.
Please, go ahead,
number-
Les.
Thank you. With regards to the EJAC committee, I'd like to see a copy of that charter. And I'd also ask the question from you, Air Resources Board rep, how many members on that board are actually EJAC members? On the Air Resources Board?
Thank you, Mr. Clark, for the question. I can see about following up to see about getting a copy of the charter. I'm not quite sure I understand your second question. So the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee is an advisory committee for CARB. I think there's a very similar sounding group, which is the advisory committee for the district. Is your question about the CARB group, I'm assuming?
No, I'm asking for the Air Resources Board member. It's my understanding you have an EJAG member on the board, Air Resources Board. You're not familiar with that?
I'm not directly familiar with it. It's not something that I've worked with, but I can follow up and see if I can get you an answer to that question though.
Well, if they're taking over CARB, I'd like to have more information. The charter would be one of the first things that the public needs to see. And I'm a part of public, big part of the public, by the way. Thank
Les,
you. Yeah.
what we'll do, we will have Mrs. Carr will meet with her staff or the person in charge and get those items to the CAC members, the charter, as well as who is the person that represents CARB on the CAR board, who that representative is. Are they from the Valley or are they from somewhere else? And we'll get that information as well as that makeup of that individual. We'll get that to the CAC members and have that available. So we'll get you that, Les.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, go ahead.
What would be helpful also along that line would be a flow chart that shows the California Air Resources Board, also the California Environmental Protection Agency, how they all line up, how the Air Pollution Control District fits into that, what overlaps we have with the various different controlling boards. From my standpoint, it'd be educational to know who's making what rules are being made that are duplicative, what rules may be contradictory, that type of thing. Excuse me?
Okay, does that make, Samir, does that?
Yeah, I think I can come up with some kind of information or graphics on sort of laying out the different, what each different agency kind of does, that matrix of, kind of air quality regulation. I mean, I'm assuming
And
you
we'd start with the governor, I guess, and then.
actually probably also with federal EPA. I think we need to throw them in the mix as well. There's different layers to this. So, but I think we can come up with something to share with the CAC.
If that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Great, thank you, Samir, appreciate that. All right, let's bring it back here to the central. Any CAC members have any questions? Okay, let's go to the public. Any comment in the public in the north?
No public comment in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south. Public comment.
No public comment in the south.
Great, let's bring it back here to the central. Any public comment? This is item number 8, ARB.
There's nobody in office, but we do have one online comment.
Okay, please identify yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Samuel Alloway. I'm the chief of the community planning branch in the Office of Community Air Protection. I wanted to give a brief update. Usually one of my colleagues, Brian Moore, gives a brief update about our AB 617 program. I thought I would do that. I don't know if I'm out of order here. This is my first time.
Yeah, you're out of order a little bit. So if you'll just stay and wherever you are, we'll come to you, okay?
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep you on. We won't drop you, but yeah, we're going to, we just left the ARBs. Then we'll go now to item number 9, and that is the appointment of interest group representatives to the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, EJAG. Morgan Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of quick background for some of the newer members, the district also has an Environmental Justice Advisory Group that's an advisory body to the board that's established in accordance with our environmental justice strategy. As part of the membership of that group, there are 3 appointees from this body, one from each of the interest groups. Currently, right now, on the city side, Mayor O'Brien is the currently appointed city interest primary member on EJAG, and his term is set to expire a little bit later this month. And so what we need today is for the CAC to provide a recommendation to the governing board to either perhaps reappoint Mr. O'Brien if he's so inclined to continue serving, or to appoint perhaps another member if it's the desire of CAC to do so. And so by way of just another little bit more backup information, the secondary or alternate appointment from this group is Mayor Pro Tem Cryer. But his term is staggered, so he's not currently up for reappointment at this time.
So excuse me, Morgan. So right now, it's the environmental justice side of the 3, correct?
The city side.
The city, just the city.
Just the city, yeah.
Okay,
City
for
primary
Mr.
appointment.
O'Brien.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are the other 2?
Right now, for the industry ag, Mr. Cunha is the primary, Mr. McLaughlin is the alternate, and on the environmental side, it is Mr. Liba is the primary, and Miss Austin Tibbetts is the alternate.
Okay, great. So,
Sure.
yes, please.
So I wanted to let everyone know right up front, because this could affect the direction we go. I did reach out to City Councilman Brett Taylor from Visalia. He is willing to serve in either position as an alternate or a primary if he's needed. Because I know many times we've not had enough people that could step up and do it. So I wanted to get that on the record. He is willing to do that in either one of those positions as needed.
What was his name?
Brett Taylor, he's on the City Council of Visalia.
Right. Okay, have we checked with Mr. O'Brien?
We have spoke with him, and perhaps since he's here today, maybe he could speak for himself.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here and I'm willing to go. I'm not going to seek re-election, so my term would end in December of '24. So if you want a continuity to extend beyond that, I'm willing to step aside for whoever you wish.
Okay.
If I may,
Yes, please, Mayor.
I believe we ought to continue him in that position with the experience that he has, and then take the action in 2024. Do we have an alternate, did you say?
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Cryer from City of Taft is the alternate currently.
That's my input.
All right, let's, yes, Mr. Liba.
I'll second the motion to reappoint Mr. O'Brien.
Okay.
I'll convert mine into a motion then.
I was just gonna say, where did that sneak by me? Excellent, excellent. Okay.
Point of clarification though.
Yes.
So on the alternate, was there a problem with the alternate, or can he continue on also?
He can continue on. He's fine.
Oh,
His
perfect.
term
Okay. I just wanna make
will
sure.
be up next year.
Okay, so it's good to know we have somebody else from the city that'll step up if they're needed later on.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. And if we can read the motion, and then we'll proceed immediately through this process. So if you could kind of give me an idea what that motion, I think it's pretty simple, but
Yes. The motion by Mr. Maderos was to appoint the city interest group representative for the Environmental Justice Advisory Group to be Mr. O'Brien.
okay, and a second.
Second was from Mr. Liba.
Great, okay. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second, and we'll proceed. Well, first I have to open this up.
We're gonna promote him up to the table because, Mr. Williams is leaving.
Okay.
We hear you down at the Bakersfield office. You're not mute. Just a
I'm
heads
moving
up.
my chair. Settle
Sorry
down.
about that, guys.
Got more members moving in. Amy, Chris, what a bunch of goobers.
Just for the record, I'm leaving after this vote, and my alternate is in Bakersfield today, and we'll be activating after that for Mr. Rios.
Okay, all right, let's go to the public at this time in the north. Any comment from the public on this appointment of this individual? Back to the city.
No public comment in the north.
Okay, great. Let's go to the south. Any public comment?
No public comment in the south.
Great, thank you. Let's bring it back here to central. Any public comment?
There's no public comment in the central office and no indication online.
Okay, great. So why don't we go ahead at this time and take the vote?
Okay, Mr. Cunha,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Fun. Yes.
thank you. Mr. Savage,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Miss Austin Tibbetts?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Thank you. Miss Deming? Yes. Mr. Liba?
Yes.
Miss Agers?
Yes.
Mr. Cryer?
Yes.
Miss Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Through the chair, motion passes.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Mr. O'Brien, very much for all the work and continuing. So thank you all. Okay, let's go to item number 10. The district's annual air toxic report. Steve Lane, is that correct?
Seth Lane.
Seth Lane, okay.
Yeah, so good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Seth Lane, Program Manager in the district's Technical Services Department. And today I'll be presenting the 2022 Annual Air Toxics Report. Just waiting for the slide to come up there. There we go. So the state and federal government have identified more than 1,700 substances that, when suspended in the air, can end up in your body through various pathways and can cause a risk to your health. These substances at sufficient concentrations and exposures can potentially impact human health, and these impacts can vary, but when dealing with air toxics, we're talking about cancer risk, long-term chronic health impacts, or short-term acute health impacts. Some of the more common air toxics are diesel exhaust particulate, or DPM, benzene, hexavalent chromium, and formaldehyde. And these toxic pollutants are not the same as the criteria pollutants, those for which the EPA has established national ambient air quality standards. But importantly, even small amounts of these toxic substances can be released into the air and impact the air we all breathe. And they get created by a variety of sources, such as cars and trucks, industrial operations, and even consumer products. So to address toxics in the valley, the district operates a multifaceted and comprehensive a program that addresses toxics on various fronts. And we refer to this approach as the district's integrated air toxics program. So within the air toxics program, we combine local, state, and federal requirements under one umbrella. The first one to mention is that the district implements the state's AB 2588 hotspots regulation, and that addresses health risk from air toxics from existing operations in the valley. We also evaluate new and modified sources of air toxic emissions, making sure we don't allow new health risk situations to be created from these new or expanding operations. We implement a large number of regulations that are designed to reduce risk from air toxics on a facility type basis as well, and we assist land use agencies by providing our expertise related to addressing and mitigating air toxic risks for development projects under CEQA. And lastly, a major component of our integrated approach are the clean air projects funded through the district's grants and incentive programs, and they've actually resulted in major emissions reductions, including toxics, such as diesel particulate matter. So through these efforts and other efforts to reduce air toxics in the valley, there's been a major reduction in cancer risk from breathing air in the valley since 1990. One such indicator of that is the benzene emissions trend in the valley, as shown here on this graph. Over the years, benzene emissions and associated cancer risks from benzene have been reduced by 90% when compared to previous levels. So this information here is based on the samples and data collected by the state at monitoring stations located in the valley, supporting health benefits for the public. So implementation of the air toxics hotspots program began in 1987, and since then the district has evaluated air toxics for thousands of facilities. We utilize the state's emissions inventory criteria and guidelines regulation, which was just recently updated in 2022. And using these state guidelines, existing facilities submit plans and reports to the district, and the plans and reports quantify and characterize air toxic emissions, which are then reviewed by the district. Using that information, the district performs a prioritization, which is a conservative screening level health risk assessment. The results of the prioritization puts a facility in one of three categories based on that facility's emissions potential to create a health risk, and it's low, intermediate, or high priority. Low and intermediate priority facilities require no further assessment under the state regulation at that time, but intermediate priority facilities are required to submit updated air toxic information on an ongoing schedule for reevaluation. So high priority facilities require further assessment, and that's because they may create a health risk. So to make that final determination, a more refined health risk analysis is required, using complex and very conservative computer modeling of their potential to create a health risk. These health risk assessments take many things into consideration, such as the potency of the toxic, the concentration of the substance, the length of exposure, how the pollutant is released into the atmosphere, such as the stack height and direction, exit velocity or temperature, also the direction they're released or the meteorological data, which is wind direction and speed, and the distance to receptor location. So based on all these results of the health risk assessment, if a facility was determined to be a high-risk facility, they would have to hold public meetings to inform their neighbors of the potential risk from that facility. And the highest risk facilities would have to make modifications to their operations, and that's to reduce the risk that they were creating to a point below that level of risk. So this slide provides a summary of the district's work in the AB 2588 program recently as we continue to assess facilities in the valley. We've rolled the assessments out through a phased approach with the number of facilities in each phase identified under the first bullet there on the slide. So since 2016, we've completed assessments for more than 6,900 valley facilities through 2022. And of those, 5,404 were conditionally exempt under the state regulation from further assessment at this time, and 1,408 are intermediate priority facilities requiring periodic update summary evaluations. There were 106 high priority facilities that, through the refined health risk assessment, were determined to be either low or intermediate risk facilities. And there are currently 19 high priority facilities being evaluated with a refined health risk assessment. All facilities categorized as intermediate priority or intermediate risk have continuing emission reporting requirements under the program, and that's to ensure that a facility is reassessed if necessary. So the previous few slides on hotspots were all about existing sources and emissions, but regarding new equipment and new sources of emissions, we analyze the potential health risk of every single operation for which we permit if the operation emits any amount of air toxics. And we help lead agencies do the same thing under CEQA. For stationary sources, we do this with a risk management review, or an RMR, and this process is very similar to the prioritization, screening, and health risk assessment process I described for hotspots. But for new or modified sources, we utilize the worst case potential emissions since the equipment is not yet in operation. So we perform this analysis for all proposed increases in toxic emissions, and health conservative assumptions and worst case conditions are assumed in our models, such as using the maximum allowed emission levels, stagnant air conditions, and long-term exposure. But the end result is always the same. The facility has to propose the best available controls for any toxic air contaminant emissions. And if the operation cannot pass the risk assessment with those emission controls, it's not an approvable project as proposed. We also implement a large number of regulations that are aimed at specific facility types or operations to further reduce air toxic emissions in the valley. The district is responsible for implementing, through our permitting and inspection processes, local, state, and federal rules and regulations that reduce air toxics. The state regulations are called Air Toxic Control Measures, or ATCMs, and they apply to a fairly wide variety of sources, with a few mentioned on this slide. And the federal regulations are generally called MAC standards for maximum achievable control technology. There are approximately 150 MAC standards. They're for various source categories, including aerospace coatings or wood preserving, for example. The district also focuses on incentive grant programs that bring about reductions in NOx and PM, but also achieve collateral reductions in air toxics as a result of these clean air projects. The district has administered more than $5 billion toward clean air projects in the valley, resulting in over 240,000 tons of emissions reduced. And the key components of these emission reductions are the multitude of grant programs aimed specifically at diesel engines. For example, thanks to retrofitting trucks, tractors, buses, and ag irrigation engines, there have been over 30,000 diesel engines replaced, resulting in the reduction of more than 17,000 tons of diesel particulate matter emissions. This is important because diesel exhaust particulate, or DPM, is one of the most potent carcinogenic air toxics, so reductions in DPM is critical to reducing public health risk. So diesel particulate is a primary pollutant contributing to the valley's cancer risk. However, we've seen a major reduction in diesel PM. It's based on CARB's 2019 California Emissions Projection Analysis Model, or CPAM for short, which the data is reflected in this chart. There has been a 75% decrease in diesel PM emissions in the valley, and this trend is expected to continue. So there's another front now related to emissions inventory and air toxics. It came about through AB 617, and it requires the state to develop a uniform statewide system of annual reporting of criteria and toxic emissions. This is important because emissions inventory data is critical to understanding emission sources and related health risks. So as a result, CARB created the Regulation for the Reporting of Criteria Air Pollutants and Toxic Air Contaminants, which is a new regulation requiring statewide enhanced reporting of facility stationary source emissions, including criteria and toxic emissions. So the district is already and will continue to be implementing the requirements of this new regulation for valley facilities and sending the compiled information over to CARB. And once CARB collects that data, they plan to update their inventory on an annual basis, and our understanding is they will eventually utilize this data on an online mapping tool. So we also work with community and business stakeholders in the San Joaquin Valley to understand air toxics and achieve reductions in air toxic emissions. We have a very important role in helping businesses understand and comply with the many air toxic rules and requirements. We are always willing to work directly with applicants who need assistance in reducing their potential air toxic impacts from new sources of emissions. And we continue to expand our ability to assist land use agencies in the valley to deal with air toxic impacts under development projects for CEQA. So we also continue to engage the public through community involvement. This is as we implement our integrated air toxics program. For instance, we work with community members to understand our role in the permitting process and understand the concept of and the conservative nature of risk analysis. We provide multilingual notices of significant permitting actions and multilingual notifications under AB 2588 when and if a high-risk source is identified. And as we work with communities to implement the monitoring, reporting, and community emission reduction mandates under AB 617, the community's understanding of the district's comprehensive air toxic program has become even more important. So also under the umbrella of AB 617, the district, like I mentioned, is continuing to work with CARB and valley facilities to implement the new enhanced criteria and toxic emissions inventory reporting regulation. So that concludes the presentation on air toxics. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the north. CAC members, any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. You've made the statement of facilities not meeting the criteria and they're not granted permits. What type of facilities have the most difficulties in achieving or meeting the regulations that you said? And with 1,700 toxins that you've identified, are they all? That's a lot. That, you know, one small toxin that could knock someone out of a performance evaluation by you.
Thanks for your question. There's not necessarily one specific type, but hopefully I can give some insight to it. The reason being, there's so many factors that are considered when we're doing the health risk assessment. So one, just for example, is the proximity of that source to different types of receptors. So the most sensitive, you know, if a source is very close to a sensitive receptor, like a school or a residential home, there would need to be maybe more controls put in place. So it's not necessarily like a type, but there's just so many different factors that come into consideration, and the meteorological data as well. But to give an example is, if there was a type of emitting source that wasn't going to be allowed above that level, a condition we might put on place would be that it couldn't be within a certain proximity of a receptor, so that it wouldn't be at that level of risk. Hopefully that helps.
It does a little. I'm sure this is all empirical data that you deal with. I'm dealing with U.S. and Cal EPAs on suppositions that this is a condition just because we believe it with no empirical data. But this is all data driven, correct?
That's right. So we run an analysis. Oh, sorry.
Because you said if a construction of a facility, you assume the worst case and they have to prove otherwise. I believe that's what you said. So, you know, it's quite difficult to absorb. Giving you the worst case would be out of tune, timing, and all the other that goes with a diesel plant or other type of mechanisms.
Right. We just use the worst case estimates just to be the most health conservative. And if it's causing an issue with the results of the health risk assessment, more information would be required to do a more refined assessment. Does that help?
It gets me to a conclusion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is Chris Savage. Thanks for the report, Seth. Appreciate it. It's a complicated program. You commented on the updated modeling and guidance that was issued in 2022, and it was substantive and created quite a lot of extra work from modeling perspective. I really have two questions for you. One is, do you feel the changes allowed for better decision making? And do you have more confidence in the model output and the new thresholds that were established? And then the second question is there any other changes that have been discussed for future adjustments that you're aware of at the moment?
So we're implementing the newest approved state guidance. We haven't noticed any issues with it. The emissions inventory criteria and guidelines regulation was also updated, and that doesn't necessarily have modeling guidance, but it has new applicability for different facility types that bring them into AB 2588. It was around 30 different applicability criteria that could bring a facility in. Now it's near 50. So there's some more facility types that would now be subject to AB 2588. And they also added all those new substances. They more than doubled the substances. That's why it's such a high number now. So we've actually known these changes were coming, and we've been a part of work groups and kind of preparing over the last several years. So it didn't come as a surprise. As far as the modeling guidance, we've incorporated the modeling guidance from CARB. And there's still other work groups working on different industry sectors. We're a part of that, so we're in the loop, working with them on those guidance that they make.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess what I'm ultimately asking for is those work groups that you're on. I wouldn't mind if you could provide an update to this group, either latter part of this year or early next year, with a status on how those work groups are going and enough detail for us to know kind of directionally where they're headed. That would be a useful update for us. Thank you.
Okay. Any other members in the north? Questions of Mr. Lane? Okay, let's go to the south. CAC members, any questions of Mr. Lane on his presentation? On the
Yeah,
toxic-
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of questions.
Please
And the
go ahead,
first-
Mr. Clark.
You know, just a clarification. In his first page, he says, what are air toxics? And in there, he said that not the same as criteria pollutants that are addressed by national ambient air quality standards. You know, okay, then you go back to the last part of it, criteria air pollutants and toxic air contaminants reporting. And CARB has adopted the regulation for reporting of criteria air pollutants and toxic air contaminants to implement 617 requirements. So what's the bridge or what's the tie, or is there any concerns on how that's gonna go, or is that another new issue for industry?
So it's actually been in place. We've been implementing it for several years, and we've really worked to integrate it into our current emissions inventory process, to where we survey the facilities and ask them activity level data. And we're doing our best to keep it the same, and I think we've been pretty successful so far. So the difference is that with the criteria and toxics reporting regulation, it's more enhanced toxics inventory. So that's why it's a slide on this presentation, because we're talking about air toxics, but that regulation requires a lot more toxics to be reported. But we're using the same questions that we've always been asking to find out that information, to try and streamline that approach. So we don't expect it to be extra work on our facilities.
Well, if there's
Mr. Chair,
another
if I could also
layer-
add to that a little bit too.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Les, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to add a little bit to that response, if that's okay with you, Les.
Sure.
Yeah, so this goes back a number of years now, and one of the things that we've tried to do, and it's still actually an ongoing effort, has also been that if there's a particular group of of regulated entities that need any sort of hands-on outreach on the sorry, there's background noise here. Is there any outreach needed, to a particular group of entities? We've been doing that as well, is actually meeting individually with groups to make sure they're aware of exactly how the reporting works. We've integrated the system into our inventory reporting as much as we can. So it's a multi-year effort. It's not, we've talked about this actually a number of times in the past. And so just an update on something that's already been going on for some time.
Well, my concern, you know what my concern is another layer through 617, and to me, that's not appropriate, but, we'll work through the process. I have some real concerns with that and the executive orders that are passed down, especially what I heard from the CARB today, the executive officer's got more power than he needs.
John Sanders.
Okay, please go ahead.
This concerns this, page 2, what are the air toxics? Not the same as criteria pollutants that are addressed by national ambient air quality standards, et cetera, et cetera. Is that because there's been a lawsuit or something to stop a certain thing? Because this eerily sounds like well, we're coming in for another way to manage this, and we're still using if it's close to a residence or close to a school. And it just seems like, for industry or environment, whatever it means, the industry is trying to do the best for the environment, but as soon as we give an inch, like feet or other things are taken, and it's not Kern County industry necessarily, it's federal industry or people driving up and down the highway that are causing a lot of this, and it's not the people who are in industry located in our area. A lot of this isn't our fault. I mean, why are we still having to knock things down further when someone else should be doing their job? That's all.
Maybe I could take a quick shot at responding, and then Seth, feel free to add more to it. But it's a really good set of points and questions. I just wanted to add a little bit more context and try to respond to the issues there, John. First of all, just to start at the end there, one thing that I think it's a very complex set of issues. So you're right. Actually, most of the background, what's called background kind of air quality related toxic risk, doesn't actually come from stationary sources. On average, it's actually primarily attributable, like you're saying, trucks up and down the freeway and other mobile sources that don't fall under the jurisdiction of the district and within like the permitted regulated community, for example. Although there is some risk that comes from those facilities, as we just described. That is a good point, and some of this gets lost as we talk about these issues. I think providing that context, I think, is important. The reason we talked about the difference between how air toxics are treated and how what are called criteria air pollutants are treated is that there is a different regulatory context for both. So you hear a lot here at the CAC about the air quality plans that we write, the rules that come out of those plans to deal, say, with ozone or PM 2.5. Those are just two of the what are called criteria air pollutants that are regulated under the Clean Air Act, and very, very prescriptive sets of requirements and things that we have to do. Air toxics are regulated under different portions of federal, state, and local law, and there is a regulatory matrix. And Seth talked about a number of these, whether it's AB 2588 under state law. Federal law does have the maximum achievable control technology requirements. So what we try to do with this program is provide kind of a comprehensive and integrated approach to how we deal with all of these other things that you sometimes don't hear as much about, but also have very important regulatory context that have actually been in place for decades now. This is, we're talking about AB 2588. I think that was adopted in 1988, if I recall. And so that, we've been working for many, many years with our regulated community to understand their information, to reduce the risk, and we've made significant reductions in that risk over the years. And actually, that's one of the big goals of this report is to highlight the progress that's been made and all the investments that have been made over the years to reduce those emissions. And then on top of that, those same sources have to also comply at times with federal MAC requirements. They have to come in and get a risk assessment if they're maybe expanding that source. Those assessments are done per state protocols to the great questions that Chris Savage had as well. And we can come back and talk some more about how that's all going. So just want to make sure you understand, like it's a very complicated, but there is a parallel regulatory set of requirements that this integrated policy that Seth just reported on is aimed at addressing. So it's not something that's brand new. I mean, there are new elements to that. We talked about the state's CTR, regulation, for example. So that's why this report's important. We can keep updating the public on what's going on. But the actual context of this goes back decades in terms of that effort to reduce air toxics.
John, are you okay? All right, super, great. Okay, any other CAC members in the South? Okay, let's bring it back here to the Central. Any CAC members? Mr. Lane, I am going to make one point. I remember this in '91, what Samir was talking about when Genevieve Sharoma from ARB was involved with toxics. And I do want to say, and And I'd like for you to emphasize more of one page that is really important of what this district has done, but what the businesses have done to address it. And that's this one. Of where we were back in that 90s, 80s, and how much you have described a couple of different activities of how much you reduced. You've reduced a tremendous amount of emissions that have been done by business in the collaborative effort of working with those industries. So the district has done a lot. I think compared to many other districts, I think you guys have done a tremendous job. And this chart cannot be forgotten, because for what you have left becomes even more difficult and more difficult, because people move houses by businesses. Businesses don't move by schools. It's the other way around. And so that makes it more even of a challenge for our businesses. But I do want to recognize even the people that even Les Clark that have been involved with, but a lot of other businesses that have done a tremendous amount of work that you folks have done. And I'd like to not forget about this page, just like the one on the far wall over there. Yeah, these have some real relevance that we have done one heck of a job in cleaning up one of the biggest ones, and that was diesel. And how we have cleaner diesel in all levels, even on the farms, the ag pumps, and everything else. And we feed the world, and we feed the world. Not Sacramento, not Los Angeles, not San Francisco. They take, they consume, and complain. So, but I do want to make this point about this. Don't forget it, because it's very much a lot of work that you and your entire folks at this district have done, but working with industry to make it happen. So again, thank you.
Page 4 is not bad either.
No, and page 4 is tremendous. Yeah, you've done a great job. All right, let me go to the public so I don't get in trouble. Is there any public comment in the north?
No public comment in the north.
Of Mr. Lane. How about in the south?
No public comment in the south.
Okay, let's bring it back here to the central. Any public comment?
No public comment in the central office, and no indication of any public comment online.
Great. Thank you again for your second presentation on this, young man.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Not very complicated.
By the way, when he said from 1990, what were you, 5 years old at that time?
I was 3, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I remember it.
You did a good job, young man. Good job. All right, let's go to item number 11. And at this time, the up-to-date on the Reduction Act of the infrastructure funding. Todd, really kind of a complicated, simple term. What do we, do you have an easier description, young man?
No, it's a lot to say. A lot of words in there.
All right, why don't we go ahead, please, okay?
Wonderful. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Brian Dodds. I'm a grants program manager here at the district, and I'm happy to be here this morning to talk about our efforts here at the district to pursue funding through the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law and some of the things that we're currently tracking. So in March, EPA released solicitation materials for the climate pollution reduction grants that are available through the Inflation Reduction Act. This program is offered in 2 phases and is geared towards states and metropolitan statistical areas. However, agencies like our air district are a big part of that process as well. The first phase, which we're currently in, provides block grants or formula grants to states. Each state was awarded $3 million, and 67 of the most populated metropolitan statistical areas were allocated $1 million each. Within the Valley, the Fresno MSA and Bakersfield MSA are among the 67 MSAs initially identified as eligible to apply for this funding. States were required to submit a notice of intent to apply at the end of last week, and MSAs are required to submit a notice to apply by the end of this month, with full proposals being due for funding at the end of May. There were 4 states that did not submit a notice of intent to apply and will not be participating in these grant opportunities. So this will allow additional MSAs to apply, which were beyond the initial list of eligible entities. So it's possible a city such as Stockton, who was not initially identified within the top 67 MSAs, would ultimately be eligible for funding. This initial phase of funding is to develop 2 plans and a final status report. The first plan is called a Priority Project Action Plan and identifies projects and concepts that are ready for near-term implementation, and this plan will be due in the first quarter of 2024. The second plan is a more comprehensive action plan, which will identify a full list of greenhouse gas sources and measures for reducing these emissions, and this plan will be due in mid-2025, with a final status report due in 2027 to discuss the full implementation of the planning process. The key concept for this first phase of funding is really to identify projects and measures that can then tap into $4.6 billion in funding that will be available through competitive processes beginning in early 2024. And if a state or an MSA does not participate in this first planning phase, they cannot participate in the implementation grant phase. So we're currently working with representatives from the eligible MSAs in the Valley to identify the responsible lead agency and developing a plan for responding to this solicitation. Secondly, we're also tracking an opportunity for alternative fuel infrastructure funding that's available through the Department of Transportation. This funding opportunity, there are 2 project categories which DOT is soliciting projects for. The first is a corridor program grant. These are larger scale projects that would provide alternative fuel infrastructure funding along, say, Highway 99 or something along those lines, some bigger geographic area where there's a transportation corridor. There's $1 million minimum project cost for this opportunity with no maximum funding limit. And DOT has $350 million that is set aside for this opportunity across the nation. The second is a community program grant. These are smaller scale projects and intended to identify specific communities where fueling infrastructure can be deployed. On this opportunity, there's a $500,000 minimum with no maximum, and again, a $350 million allocation for this component. Eligible project types under this solicitation include electric vehicle charging, hydrogen, natural gas, or propane. And currently, we're fielding calls from interested project partners on proposals for the solicitation. Applications are due at the end of May, so we're working with potential project partners on developing and submitting proposals in response to the solicitation. So busy couple of months ahead for these opportunities. There's also a couple of opportunities through EPA's environmental justice grants that we're tracking as well. The first is for government agencies to partner with community-based organizations to develop plans, projects, and pilot implementation activities. Up to $1 million is available for each award under this opportunity. Applications are due April 14th, and the district will submit a proposal to work with community-based organizations across the Valley to deploy clean air room filters throughout the Valley, similar to projects we've done in the past that have been very successful. There's a second opportunity for community-based organizations to apply for up to $500,000 for environmental justice collaborative problem-solving grants. The district is not eligible to apply for this funding, although we have encouraged CBOs throughout the Valley to apply. In addition, EPA is currently seeking input on funding available through their environmental justice and climate justice block grants. Up to $2.8 billion will be available to provide block grants to activities benefiting disadvantaged communities. We're currently commenting on program design, as well as the types of eligible projects, reporting, and oversight necessary for this type of program in advance of their April 10th deadline for comments. And for your reference, these are some links to the opportunities that are currently available through EPA and the DOT that we are working on. And that will conclude my presentation, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
If I could make, Mr. Chair, just one other quick closing comment. There are other pots of funding that that we're not eligible for, that maybe have some kind of a nexus to air quality. Could be infrastructure-related funding, goods movement, other things of that nature. So as individuals here, to the extent you're involved in any of those projects and would like to see maybe some support or something along those lines, always feel free to reach out to us as well. That's something that we've heard from throughout the valley, that there's certain projects that may be in the works, and we're happy to take a look at those and see if there's any way that those could be supported. So just let me know if you have anything along those lines that wasn't addressed by some of the information that was shared today.
Question for you, Samir or John, one of you two. The funds that could be available deal with air quality, right? In some type of form of PM, correct?
The projects that we'd be working towards would have an air quality benefit.
Air quality benefit. So rather than putting in a bunch of solar on the west side of our valley, we're going to have a lot of land open, correct? And you're going to have PM10 or PM something coming off that land. Would our cities, our irrigation districts, be eligible to apply for funding to build reservoirs on that farm land to create recharge and controlling emissions from dust or some type of coming off that land? Would they be eligible to apply, and it's a big shot of a question, for those funds to build reservoirs? They would dig the hole, put the water in it, and let it recharge the basins, rather than putting a bunch of solars that are going to create a bunch of heat and a bunch of destruction.
Yeah. So the current solicitation that EPA has open for these planning grants and later the implementation funds will have to have a climate improvement component associated with them. I'm not sure if you'd be able to make the argument that building a reservoir would do that, but what we need to do is identify the measures within the plans that would provide greenhouse gas benefit, and then we can go, when they have implementation funding, and apply for those types of activities starting next year as EPA rolls out solicitations for the actual implementation of those measures.
I'll just say one other thing. In thinking about your question, Mr. Chair, that the first thing that popped in my head too was, how do we actually find those funds in the context of all the various IRA funds and other maybe funds that may be available? And so the first thing that came to mind was the various sustainable ag funds that are yet to be fully defined. I think there's about $5 billion in IRA through USDA for a variety of different programs. Some I think are plus ups, most of them of existing programs. Others I'm not so sure about. We don't really know the details on that yet. So maybe there's opportunities in the context of agriculture in that stream. Are there other infrastructure funds? We just talked about some of the ones that are sort of in front of us right now. It's not to say that there aren't other streams. And even like Brian said, if there's a nexus to climate that we can argue there in terms of the alternatives to not having better water recharge, and what are all the various impacts are related to that. Obviously, we could quantify, I think, some PM and even public health impacts from not getting a better handle on how to deal with the west side and some of the fallow acres and all that. So I think there's definitely the air quality and the public health side of it. Can we also tie in the climate piece maybe there is, we could certainly, at least from now, identify it as something of interest, and that way we can, as the implementation funds start coming out, maybe we can figure out a way to, to make that case. But then, again, maybe there's other funds actually that are
They're better.
good sources for what you're talking about, which I think, with the floods and everything, I think I've heard that. I know you've mentioned that before, and I think it's something we should be putting an ask around, and then going into federal government saying, well, how do we fulfill this opportunity that's in front of you right now, and help us to deal with actually multiple issues at the same time.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the north. CAC members, questions of the staff.
Yep, this is Chris. I have questions.
Go ahead,
thanks
please.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, you guys. It was good. I really have two comments. One is easy, one is probably a little bit harder. So the easy one is Samir's offer for district support on projects that they would otherwise not be able to apply for. And Samir, thank you for commenting on that. That's important. If you want to let us know the mechanism that you'd like those requests to come in, I think that could be helpful versus what is likely to be a bit of a free-for-all. So maybe something to consider. And if you want it all to go to your grant funding group, that's fine, but I think we ought to have a process so that they can be prioritized. And then my next comment is really about prioritization. Hey, man, you might want to turn your mic off. There you go. There is going to be so much funding and interest in tapping into that funding as it starts to roll out. The question that I am wrestling with right now from this group and other things that I'm involved with is prioritization, so that we actually can go after the things that make the most difference for us over the long term, and how that prioritization process needs to work. The district, in my mind, has a fairly significant role to play in this, simply because of your regulatory oversight requirements and obviously cooperating with CARB. What I think is a bad outcome for us is we have no either valley-wide or statewide prioritization of things we want to go after, and there ends up being a whole lot of these planning grants submitted that they appear disparate and not coordinated, which means California and maybe certain areas are unable to take advantage of that because of that lack of clarity of purpose, is how I'll describe it. It would be interesting to know if you've, one, thought about that, and two, if you haven't, I would like to see the district staff think about it and come back to this group with what do you view as how those prioritizations should work. Because it shouldn't be the loudest voice in the room that rules the roost. It ought to be based on some more methodological approach for how we consider priority projects. We will do well as an area or well as a state if we are better coordinated around that prioritization and have clarity of purpose. So in all the meetings I'm in where this is a topic of conversation, I have the same comment. So curious if you've, one, thought about that, and two, if you haven't, I'd like to have you think about it and bring it back to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Todd, or Samir, either one of you?
Yeah, let me respond to that first, and Brian, if you want to add anything to it, feel free. Yeah, no, I mean, we've been wrestling with this issue, Chris, since the adoption of the multi-trillion-dollar, packages here. So it's a big deal, and we're definitely an important player in that, but certainly not the only player. And there's different levels to this. I mean, there's a state level. I don't know if it was super clear in Brian's presentation, but the state is getting a $3 million planning grant under that, the climate pollution reduction program. Just as one example, that's one of hundreds of examples of parallel issues to what your comment is to, okay, well, what's the state going to do with that planning grant? What process are they going to go through? What's going to be identified as priorities for the state, in terms of climate-related opportunities, so that then when the implementation grants come out, what's addressed in that plan is what's of interest to the state as a whole. And so these are all questions. I don't have the answer for you on that. I've got the question out there, but I can't answer that for you at this point. But what I can tell you though is from early, and I'm going to share with the CAC a document that we pulled together that we've been sharing with the dozens of federal agencies that are involved in actually implementing this funding. So it's not just EPA. We talked about EPA today. We've got rail authorities and transportation and, you know, USDA, and every one of them has different agencies within them. So we've been sharing with the federal government and pushing for what we have called a whole of government approach in helping to prioritize the funds in a manner that helps non-attainment areas like ours achieve our goals while also moving forward with the, you know, the various climate related goals. And so we pull together, you know, whether it's on the agricultural front or whether it's on the transportation freight related fronts, there's a couple different elements to this. We've recommended to the federal government how to basically prioritize those funds in ways that help our region meet our goals. So I'm happy to share that document with you. Now, when it comes to, if you're talking about what we consider priorities, I mean, I think that document will help shed some light to the CAC. And it's really just driven by what our board has taken numbers of actions on over the years in our legislative platform process across these different areas, includes even wildfire related issues. I mean, these funds kind of run the spectrum of different opportunities. But in terms of what we can, you know, consider priority projects, when say there's multiple projects coming out of the region for, you know, maybe under a solicitation or something like that, we're very careful in that process to not pick winners or losers. I mean, that's something that we've, you know, we're very sensitive to that issue. It's a big basin, a lot of different projects that may be coming out of our region. If there are a lot of projects, I would love to have that problem. You know, I'd like to, I would like to have the situation where we're not, you know, or basically we're not applying for funds. That's part of why we bring this kind of discussion up to the CAC, so people are aware of these opportunities. So generally, as long as the project has an air quality benefit to it, we're supportive of the project. And so I'll send you an email maybe with some information. The grant director is really the primary point of contact for any letters of support requests or other maybe technical type of support requests that come in. But that grant director, Todd DeYoung, he'll route it. If the issue isn't really within the grants department spectrum of things, it'll get routed to other leadership here that can help see if we can find ways of supporting the project. So I'm happy to share a process for doing that. I'll share our recommended priorities to the federal government, and we'll continue sharing as we have here. We're not mandated to do anything I just described, by the way. So just keep in mind that as a regional agency, you know, I look at this as an opportunity for helping our region be competitive for these funds to help us with our mandates. I'm practically begging the federal government to really acknowledge how difficult our attainment situation is, so that when they come up with these different funding streams, they can place priority for non-attainment areas, especially extreme non-attainment areas like ours. I would love for, you know, the CAC to, you know, to the extent you think you can help amplify that, you know, it'd be great to get even more support for that effort. But it's not just us. I mean, there's definitely a coalition growing. We're actually working with other regions like South Coast, for example, to make sure that they're also making the same point about, you know, these same federal funds. So I don't know if that fully answers your question. We'll continue presenting. Chris, I'll see if I can help further these updates, you know, or have them benefit from your suggestions to see what we could do to help make these as productive as possible. But I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. But that's a little bit more of a context as to what we're actually doing with this whole situation beyond what, you know, Brian has shared here. Brian, did you have anything else?
I don't think I could answer it any
All right.
better than that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate the response, and I knew the question that I was asking was not an easy answer. I knew you're working on some things, and I want to go down the path of amplification of priorities because if the basis of determination of grants we want to go after is based on the multitude of all priorities in the district, and they all are in theory are going to have a nexus to air quality, otherwise you wouldn't be doing your jobs. I think there's a sub-prioritization within that is equally as important. And if there is opportunity for some of us to participate in that with you for a perspective, and then again to help amplify that in other venues, then I think you should take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick
Keith,
May-
go ahead.
One quick question that follows up, Mr. Cunha's comment. Are you saying that, cities, for instance, that have developments on their, where there's an annexation and there's developments that are, going forward, and there's a regional park, let's say, and we have property that was, an almond grove, and everything that goes along with it from the air pollution aspect that deals with the district. If we have a basin for percolation of water, and it's also converted into a park so that you don't have a situation to where the dust or anything would be a factor, is there a possibility that there would be a component for grants from the district itself or from the state itself?
The short answer is I'm not sure.
No,
You know, I hate for that to be I don't want that to be the answer, 6 months from now as we see how these different funds are materializing. What I can tell you though is I think that as we as a region learn more about where the opportunities are around developing more basins, some of this could be related to city-related projects. A lot of what I think Manuel was talking about isn't necessarily even tied to that. You're talking about, many thousands of acres on the west side somewhere where, rather than doing a very crude, sort of fallowing of land, where you don't have access to enough water or enough infrastructure to, say, continue growing on pieces of land, and therefore, maybe are selling land off to solar developers, and seeing those kinds of projects. Is there an ability to to maybe do other alternatives to that where it makes sense? There are certain parts of the valley where I think recharge and soil conditions and all that, where there's maybe some really good opportunities for recharging. Can we create some funding streams to help create that, as opposed to only either seeing some really crude fallowing or maybe solar being like the primary sort of options that are going on now? But you just extended that ask out to maybe even more opportunity, right? Like around some land, some unused land, or maybe allocated land that's either within a sphere of influence or within the city where. And I don't want to speak outside of my expertise on that, because I'm actually, I know there's probably some sort of ratepayer structure or something that ultimately results in how basining kind of works within, or fee structure or something that, develops these basins within a city sort of context. But maybe there's an ask there, right, that we can put together as a region to put it out there to any of the water related infrastructure funds that may be developing right now that could create some sort of pipeline for that. So
It's worth exploring, is
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments in the north from the yes,
Just,
please.
Just real quick. I know I've participated with the White House at US EPA's comments on this program, and it appears like everything that they put out is more MPO or MSA centric and tribal centric. Now, Caltrans has come on up with a strategic plan to 2050, and they've just started having some combined or joint meetings with CARB. Are we, first off, continuing that to go along with what Mr. Savage stated, coming up with a consolidated and a complete plan as we move forward? I know in transportation, there are certain blocks that have to be checked, but at the same time, are we checking those same blocks with CARB and EJAG? Samir, I think you'd be the one that would get that. And Todd, thank you very much for the presentation. That was very well.
I think first on your first observation, I think that's been an interesting development for sure. On the MSA kind of centric approach, like on that EPA grant that came out. I'm not sure how many more are going to be. I know there's some energy efficiency grants too that came out to like a block granting process. That's got a lot to do with the municipal sort of kind of approach. Now on the broader kind of question about checking all the boxes and all that, that means definitely something that we want to build into anything that we would be directly applying for. So as we think about, for example, these climate pollution reduction grants, we're still not sure exactly how those applications are going to be pulled together. They're city kind of driven, but they're for the whole county. So it's a really confusing kind of an approach that EPA came up with. I would think in that process, as you go down that list, that we want to see, we want to make sure, that those applications are, they meet all the requirements, and that, to kind of Chris's sort of point around the state side of things, I'd like to actually see where the state is also going, with the same, they actually have a planning grant under the same solicitation. So we've had an inquiry out on that level to see how those things integrate together. So I guess the bigger point I would just raise is that I want to be very clear about this. While there's a law called the Inflation Reduction Act, it's being implemented in very different ways across many, many different agencies. There isn't any sort of, as far as I can tell, there's a very, very high level plan that the federal government's come up with of, okay, the funds are going to go here and there kind of a thing. Every agency has been going through a whole different process of how they want to run this. Sometimes it's municipal, sometimes it's, we can directly apply, many times we can't directly apply. So within every one of those buckets of opportunities, we do need to, I agree with you. I think we need to figure out a way to engage the region, have, come up with an approach, again, to the extent that we can actually apply for something and do it, through that proper process. But it's really hard to do that at the whole, the best I could do there probably would be to share with the CAC, and we continue evolving this. We have tried to provide at a very high level to the federal government across all these different agencies what we consider our priorities. None of them will surprise you. They're all, very consistent with what you keep hearing as far as our legislative platform and, the things that, we've been talking about for a long time. So that's about as close as it gets to like an overall, what we think the priorities should be. But it's very complicated. It's a lot of different agencies, a lot of different funding streams. And we'll just keep coming back to the CAC with reports as we see opportunities. And that's about as good as I think it's going to get. It's just very messy right now.
Okay, any other comments in the north, excuse me, CAC. All right, let's go to the south. Any CAC members, questions of Samir and Mr. Dion? All right, hearing none, let's bring it here to the central. Any comments from CAC members? Okay, maybe Samir, maybe on all of this stuff that we're going through is maybe we have and spend a half a day maybe having a workshop with you guys, the Air District, and the various cities that are in the valley here of projects that they're going to be doing and submitting maybe for funds. If that makes sense, maybe we have a collaborative effort to where you can apply and those then can apply to you to get the money, vice versa, of what is happening in this valley due to all types of activity due to climate and non-climate, and that maybe it's something we can think about, that putting together some type of half a day workshop just strictly on these type of grants and programs that both the districts are applying for and the cities are applying for. Because if we got a city like this one applying for it, then maybe there's some other cities that still can do that. And maybe there are.
No, just us. That's
and that's okay. So I don't know. That's just an idea.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll talk to federal agencies as well, and maybe some of the congressional offices that might be able to pull together some kind of some centralized ways of talking about this. Definitely don't want to take on that responsibility by ourselves. As we see some of those going on. But if there is a way I've actually seen there's a number of different webinars that have been made available. One thing we could do also is as we see some of those being developed and some of them are Zoom. Sorry, Les, but I don't think those can all be face to face. But as those come out as well, we can email those out to the CAC to make sure that you're all sharing those with your members and your colleagues. So I'll see if there's ways to do that. Maybe even have a local workshop as well. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
No, great. Thank you. Okay. Anything from the public in the north?
No comment, public comment in the north.
Okay, great. In the south?
No public comment in the south.
Great, thank you. And the central?
No public comment in the central office or online.
Okay, great. Thank you very much again, Mr. Young. Let's go to item number 12, 617, both Jessica and ARB. Brian, so I'll turn it over to you folks.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Chair, the committee. My name is Jessica Olson. I am the Director of Community Strategies and Resources. My team oversees AB 617 implementation. Last month, we did pass out materials, and hopefully it was helpful for some of the newer folks to talk briefly about how communities are selected for this program. So just a quick reminder is that CARB annually considers selection of a disproportionately impacted or disadvantaged community or several each year. We're actually now up to 19 that CARB has selected officially across the state. 4 of those are here in the Valley, and so that's South Central Fresno, Shafter, Stockton, and Arvin-Lamont. And each community establishes a community steering committee made up of residents, businesses, local agencies, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders that all come together. We meet monthly on Zoom to work together to implement what we call our Community Emissions Reduction Program, which is a program that was adopted by our board and then approved by CARB, and also the community air monitoring networks and the plans that go along with those. So we've been meeting monthly and we'll continue to meet monthly as long as community members are interested in hearing the updates on implementation of both of those plans and programs in each of the 4 communities. Just a couple of few updates that I have is that more recently we've been working together in a lot of the different communities on kind of bigger, more complex projects. So a lot of our incentives programs are replacing maybe an older piece of equipment with new equipment, as we know that gets a lot of emissions reductions. But some of our more complex and more complicated, maybe just more intensive programs include urban greening and vegetative barriers. I've updated on that, as well as working with municipalities, and in this update in Shafter and in Arvin-Lamont on sidewalk improvements and trying to provide kind of some of the mitigating dust or allowing folks to take alternative transportation or even walk places where they otherwise would have to drive. So being really creative, working with the community to and the local agencies to get a lot of these projects done has been our focus the past few months, and we plan to take a couple of those updates to our board this month. Tomorrow, speaking of not Zoom though, we will be hosting our first in-person CSC meeting with the Stockton community since February of 2020. So we're really excited. We're going to talk a lot about community engagement at the meeting, a lot about our schools engagement, and just generally about AB 617 and working together to continue kind of the positive momentum we have going there. So really looking forward to continuing to maybe once or twice a year meet in person across our other committees. And I've updated this group before. We've done that so far in Arvin-Lamont. We're still looking in Fresno to schedule one. And in May, we hope to do one in Shafter. So we're really excited about that. And then finally, I just wanted to let folks know, I've updated the past couple meetings, but we provide sometimes weekly, sometimes daily, but no more than monthly, or no, like less frequently than monthly updates on our community.valleyair.org website. So you can actually go to that website, see each of our 4 selected communities. We report out all of the incentives that we've been spending, all of the progress we made on all of the measures. You can see all of the community air monitors. You can see live updates on air quality information. You can see the agendas and recordings for all of those meetings. So just a lot of, resources and materials for the community and also, of course, other interested stakeholders to keep up with us. Community.valleyair.org. Thank you. So that is it for my update, and I will pass it. I know that you heard him earlier. So Femi, who is actually the chief of the community planning branch with CARB's Office of Community Air Protection, is going to be giving the update instead of Brian today.
Yes, thank you, Jess. And sorry for interrupting earlier. I was unaware of the agenda, so I apologize for that. Again, my name is Femi Olawoye. I'm chief of the community planning branch. So I oversee the team that develops the statewide strategy or blueprint, as well as the team that oversees our selection process and the development of our emission reduction programs. And as just mentioned today, usually it's Brian that presents our update, but he is out on vacation, so I'm filling in for him today. Just a couple of quick things. We are working on an update to our blueprint. This will be feature a reimagining of our program, where we're going to be highlighting certain elements like how we are looking at how equity plays a role in our program, providing some lessons learned from the last 5 years, and really providing hopefully a little bit more guidance on how some of our program elements are constructed, or at least a way that an opportunity to orient some new folks to the program as we are continuing to bring in communities or bring in just folks that are already existing in communities to our program. So we're looking forward to releasing a rough draft of that, hopefully by the end of the month, if not early May. We will follow that up with a couple of public workshops that we are looking to have. Well, they will be by Zoom, but we'll be looking to have workshops really featuring each region. So featuring a workshop that will be centered on the San Joaquin Valley District, a workshop that will be centered on the Bay Area and Northern California, and workshops that will be centered on Southern California as well, just so we can make sure to allow enough opportunity for those particular areas to present their interest in the program, as well as just some understanding of some issues that they may want us to address in certain ways, or what have you. So really wanting to present as much opportunity as we can to these different areas, these distinct areas, in order to allow for the comment and really their engagement in the program. We expect to release the final draft in early September, and our board hearing will be in September for the final draft of the guidelines. So we look forward to our process and the engagement of the district, and as well as communities in the area. Lastly, we are also working on an annual update, an annual report, which says summarize results and actions of community emission reduction programs across the state. We expect that to be released also next month, and we will be sharing that information with this group as well, and through Jess and the Air District as well. Other than that, I did want to actually provide just a quick informational update regarding a question I was asked earlier about the EJAC, the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. It does not have board members as part of the committee itself. It does have discussion with board members, so usually our chair will be convening the group. So you may have heard a board member involved in those discussions. That has been the South Coast board member, Gideon Krakoff. He has been actually acting in place of the chair while she's been away. But again, board members are not part of the EJAC itself. We do have also I should say the EJAC is a group that does discuss primarily the AB 32 scoping plan. There is a different advisory committee called the AB 617 consultation group. That group does have 2 board members, Dr. John Baums, as well as Davina Hurt from the CAR board. So there may be, and those 2 groups are fairly similar. That group particularly discusses our blueprint with us. So it is a group that's centered around the AB 617 program, while the EJAC group is primarily centered around the scoping plan. So it is a slightly similar, but again, these are 2 distinctly different groups. And in some cases, there are some members that are on both groups, but again, not board members. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity on that question. But please let me know if there are questions on that or any other that I can maybe take back and provide more clarity in a later time.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. At this time, any comments from the CAC board members in the north? Of both folks. Okay, hearing none, let's go to the south. Any comments from the CAC board?
Yeah, I've got to ask a question from this gentleman. What's his name?
My name is Sammy Olaluwoye.
Sam, yeah.
So you're saying that there's no environmental justice representing on the Air Resources Board?
No, there is no board member from our Air Resources Board on the EJAC itself. They may participate on the discussions like the chair normally does, but the members are not part of the actual EJAC. And I can send some information you guys' way just to provide some clarity. I think you asked for the charter earlier.
My intelligence is that there's a lot of close ties with that. And let's get back to 617. I've got questions on that too.
Okay.
So you're making another round as, as far as, what folks want to talk about. Well, the Air Resources Board come in and to begin with, expanded a lot of the areas that were not a part of the original plan. And so we've gone through that. Now we're going to go through another round of issues that are going to be thrown back on the table that were discussed in the first plan. That's what I'm gleaning out of your report. And I'm not real excited about that. I think as we go through this process, if you're looking for zero risk, there's never going to be zero risk. But let me get back to other environmental justice. There is a close connection with the Air Resources Board with environmental justice. And to you, I'm saying that environmental justice is running the Air Resources Board. So, I mean, you can relay that to all your friends up there, but that's a fact. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you, Les. Any other CAC board members' comments or questions of the presentation in the South? Okay, let's bring it back here to the Central. Any comments from the Central folks? All right, let's open it to the public in the North. Any comments?
No public comment in the North.
Okay, in the South, public comment?
No public comment in the South.
Great, thank you. Bring it back here to the Central.
There's no public comment in Central and no indication of any comments online.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Item number 13 for the Public Relations Department, PR, press, TV and cameras and everything.
All the things. Good morning.
Between you and Jamie. Samir, you got your hands full. You got your hands full. You can't ask anymore.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, and I'd like to, I want to make a comment about the presentation you did on St. Patrick's Day, the showing, and I don't know if you're going to comment on that or not.
I was, but you go ahead.
No, I will let it to you,
Okay.
young lady. Go for
Very
it.
good. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Heinz. I'm the program manager with the Outreach and Communications Department. It is my pleasure to be here today. I will try and be brief because we are over noon, but I was going to talk about something that Manuel brought up. On March 17th, we pulled together with his support and a lot of stakeholder support. We put together a press event out at the Fresno Farm Bureau. And the main point of this event, besides the ask for more funding, of course, is something that we're employing moving forward quite a bit, which is providing the examples of the actual replacements and the actual work we're doing in the community in front of the media and our partners, albeit Manuel brought a couple of farmers and the new equipment they were using in the field after we crushed their equipment last summer. He brought them with their new equipment to this event, and we spoke about the benefits of all of the ag programs and all of the programs and the work the district does. And we got a lot of coverage out of that, a lot of press out of that, a lot of people there that day, a lot of conversations came out of that. But that is essentially our current focus. We are going to people that have lawnmowers, people that have gotten a vehicle, a heavy-duty truck, you name it, all of the examples throughout our grant program, and we're telling the story of those individuals. Expect to see more commercials coming forward from telling those stories and sharing the good word of what we're doing. And I will let you speak about that event, Manuel, but just real quick, as far as the coming weeks, expect the district to be all over the place. We have a robust team that will be out in the field at EV Ride and Drives, at Earth Day events, at community fairs, at community events, all the major cities, all the small cities, not all of them, but a lot of major small cities and big cities. We're going to be all over the place. So spring activities, if you've got something coming in the next, 8 weeks, please ship it our way. If it's something we can have a presence and have a conversation about, hey, somebody's doing some fancy footwork. And on the screen, you all are seeing an image from Friday, March 17th. We totally went green for ag on St. Patrick's Day. And that is a collection of a lot of hardworking folks in that photo from the stakeholders and our partners at NRCS, the Farm Bureau, and all the various places. I'll let you guys identify all of them.
but it was a wonderful event, and more of that will come.
Great, thank you very, very much. Again, Samir, thank you and the entire team for being out there and getting out there. I think with the legislators that appeared, the staff that appeared, and I think the big yellow machine, as some of you are seeing on the screen, is the new and modern means of harvesting almonds. So that reduces the amount of particulate matter in the fields, but the farmers, I think, are doing a tremendous job of creating new and innovative ways to reduce emissions. But again, if it wasn't for the district and the partnership of having that and the research side of it and having facts rather than just hearsay out of a book that's not even written. Again, thank you all so very much. You did a great job, and I think it turned out to be excellent. Even upon the weather, the field that we were going to, we would have had to have had boats, and it would have been a tremendous mud fight between everybody trying to survive out there in the fields. But I think you did a great job. So any questions of Heather in the north by the CAC board? Okay, let's bring it to the south. Any questions? Okay, let's bring it back here to the central. Any questions?
I have not so much a question. Well, it is a question. To get the ERC board involved, how would we go about that? Would we contact you directly? And I say this because I am sitting on a board coordinating a transportation summit in September, and it's all focused on alternative transportation. So
That's fantastic. Yes, actually, I mean, certainly a call to the district. Public.education@valleyair.org is the general inbox for all the outreach team, myself, Jamie, anyone. But yes, please, if you speak it, we will dig it up and look into it.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to definitely go after this one.
Yeah.
This one is really with Jamie. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. All right, let's go to the public. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Just passing me up here. If I may, we have a farm show in Tulare. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
we were there. It was amazing.
That's what I was going to ask. You were there, and
yes.
Were you able to do some of this at the farm show?
Oh yes, we had a lot of good conversations. A robust amount of staff at the farm show. We were there every day. We had a booth, and we had teams of our grants individuals kind of pacing the atmosphere, talking to individuals. Go ahead.
Yeah, just as a piece of the farmer advocacy, that that event, by the way, was related. That's why we had legislators there talking about the benefits of the farmer program and all the opportunities that we have in the valley. But the World Ag Expo, not the Tulare Ag Expo, the World Ag Expo, was a great opportunity for bringing it happens to be in Tulare, wonderful city of Tulare. So we invited actually legislators and board members and others to come, and there was actually a small convening there that we held to talk about the same opportunities, the new equipment that's being made available today. And so again, just to make sure we continue promoting just how much great work is going on in the Valley, the Ag Expo was a great place to do that as well. There's a lot of really cool technology there.
Yeah, that opening morning, the speaker was there, and the House Ag Committee had a meeting. So I mean, there was a great opportunity there. So you did have the opportunity to interact with them.
Yeah, we actually had a booth there. We're providing a lot of outreach as well to everybody that was going through there. So yeah.
See, it's so big I can't see everything that's there. So I apologize. Is that right? You've done that then? Okay.
Great. Okay, let's go to the public. Any comments of Jamie from the public in the north?
No public comment in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south. Public comment?
No public comment in the south.
Great, thank you. Let's bring it back here to central, the public comment.
No public comment in the central office or online.
Great, thank you very much. Again, thank you, Heather, very, very much. Your entire team, all of you worked very, very hard, and the green donuts definitely added to that.
The green donuts.
I'll never forget. I've never seen a green donut in my life, and a green donut that I did see was not very healthy. But those green donuts
they were tasty.
They were
And I'll
Everybody
get
was-
you an email through.
Everybody
with my
was eating
information.
them. Everybody was eting them. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Amanda,
Great
for all
job.
of your support.
Okay, let's go to CAC items number 14, comments in the central here. Any comments from CAC members you want to bring up about any of the water damage or anything of that type? Whatever it is, please.
Well, in the sake of time, it's late anyway, but I'm from the Tulare area. Both our GSA covers a lot of it and the city does. And the damage was extensive, and most of you have seen the video, and a lot of them were friends and clients of mine, and it was tough to deal with. And it poured over into Kings County, obviously, and I'm sure, I'm not sure exactly the damage that Fresno County suffered, but there were areas of Tulare County that were very severe.
Kelly.
So I might as well just do it. Okay. So, yeah, there's a lot. It obviously went through Tulare to get to us. And we have a lot of damage and more to come. And there's more going to be in Fresno and Merced and Madera. So a lot of trees are damaged, and so they will be taken out if they weren't already, because they had wet roots and then wind came through yesterday, and so we're not done yet.
No.
Bring a boat and a life jacket.
Okay, any comments in the north from CAC board members of anything you wish to bring up at this time?
Just a quick comment. Is there a technological reason why CARB is not on camera when they present to us, or is that a choice?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I'm not aware of a technological reason for not being on camera. So, I mean, if there's an interest in having, I presume there's an interest in having them maybe on camera, I'm happy to pass that request along if they're not still on the meeting right now.
Thank you. As a public meeting, I think it's important that we're on camera. So if we can make that request, I can't recall the last time they actually were on camera, so it would be helpful. Thanks.
Chris, I'll just do my technology and I'll just go ahead and make it happen, okay? It's just technology, that's all. It's Sacramento at its best, and we have a tremendous staff here. We'll just tap into their system and overpower them, and we'll leave you folks with that, okay? Is that all right? Okay, we'll make that happen, Chris, okay? All right, any other CAC members in the north, please? Anybody? Okay, great. Thank you all. And about in the south, Mr. Clark, your team, anybody there?
I got a couple comments as far as the water goes. My daughter was, she lives in Wood Lake, and so the gentleman is talking about the Tulare at Porterville, Passaic area. They had pumps going all night to make sure that they, kept their house from flooding. But some of the houses around are 3 foot of water. That's in Wood Lake. So, I mean, that's the part that I know, and I've seen it firsthand. As far as Kern County goes, Mulkey is our water master down here. And it's been on our local news for the last 3 or 4 days that they're real concerned about Kern River being able to hold the water that's going to be headed our way. And so they're talking about, maintenance right now and checking the bridges out and whatnot. And also the thought that if it gets too bad, there'll be parts of Bakersfield that will experience some flooding. Bakersfield proper. I'm not talking about out in the field. I'm talking about downtown Bakersfield. That's been discussed over the last 3 days on television. So that's just for the update for y'all. So there you go.
Thank you, Les, very much. I'm sorry again for all of everybody's disasters and problems. Okay, I think we're good. I'll be happy to do the presentation before the board on the April board meeting. And again, I apologize I don't know what else to do about it. And we had a great amount of information, and yet I thought, went through it pretty darn fast. But anyway, I want to thank everybody, Samir, your team, Heather, everybody again for everything you guys do. And every board member, thank you so much for being present and helping keep this CAC moving in the right direction and working with our community. So everybody, have a safe weekend and be safe. Thank you. Board adjourned.